Well, welcome everybody. We're really glad you could join us to this Monday Masterclass. I'm excited about this one, not just because I get to be quiet and listen, but because we have a really interesting topic. It's creating a job map like a pro. And Scott Burleson is going to take us through that. And Scott is a pro on this. The things you can do with a job map are pretty amazing. Some of you are familiar with our trigger maps. We have something called an outcomes map. You're going to be able to take that and use that and modify it. But there's some really special things about job maps that Scott's going to take us through. So without chewing up any more precious time, Scott, I think I'm going to turn it over to you.
That sounds great, Dan. My granddad used to say something sometimes. Yesterday being Father's Day, he'd say, "I'm so excited. I feel like I could jump up and down." And that's what I feel like about job maps. Now, I'll admit, create a job map like a pro in 30 minutes. That's a bit aggressive. It takes practice to learn how to do anything. But I will say this, we're going to cover all the key topics that will enable you to create a job map like a pro. To actually be able to do that, you definitely will have to practice. So let's get a look at our agenda here. So we have 8 steps, 8 things we're going to cover. We're going to do a quick background on jobs to be done. We obviously don't have time for anything in depth, but just in case anybody doesn't have any background at all, this wouldn't make sense without it. So we're going to do a quick background on jobs to be done. We're going to talk about what is a job map, a pretty fundamental question if we're going to build one like a pro. We're going to look at really the cornerstone article of the cornerstone piece of job maps. A Harvard Business Review article from 2008 by Lance Bettencourt and Anthony Ulwick, the customer-centered innovation map. It just didn't have the name job map at the time, but it's a great piece, so we're gonna show it. We're gonna talk about what's the purpose of a job map, what is it useful for, and then this is sort of like a mirror looking in a mirror into infinity, maybe. But I'm gonna show you a job map to build a job map, or at least it's the one I personally use. And then I'm going to share my secret 7 job map tips. So don't tell anybody else outside of our crew today, right? These are highly, highly secret. And then we're going to look at what I'm calling a D- job map, a D- job map. And here together, we're gonna see if we can't, as a group, improve it. And then have a little additional reading. And so for time, we're going to watch it. I'm going to hit that 30 minutes as closely as I can. And for that, I might ask you to hold your questions, especially given we've got with the size of our group, we should have plenty of time for discussion afterwards. But so I can hit that 30 minutes. If you have any questions, I might ask you to scribble down on those. I will ask for some participation when we get in that improving a D- job map. So I'm going to need your help. So with that, let's do a very quick background on jobs to be done. Now, you might have heard this phrase, milkshake marketing. You might have heard a man's name, Dr. Clayton Christensen, unfortunately passed away last year, but really made jobs to be done accessible for all of us. And it really, a lot of his early writing came from this case study. So McDonald's wanted to improve their milkshakes, and they tried the things we all try. They did discounts and coupons. They bundled things together, different flavors. But unfortunately, the sales stayed flat. You know, trying to think about what they could do with this milkshake. They just weren't getting a lot of success. So they brought in Dr. Christensen and his crew. And so they started to do a little research. And they noted that a lot of milkshakes, a high percentage, were sold in the morning. A lot of them were sold like between 6 and 8 a.m. to a single person by themselves. I guess most single people are by themselves, but in a car. And they were driving to work. And they didn't buy anything else. They only purchased the milkshake. And so they went back, the interviewing team went to some of these customers buying milkshakes. And they didn't use this exact words, but essentially they asked, for what job are you hiring this milkshake? And they got lots of interesting responses. And one of the things they looked at were, what are alternatives? Alternatives were bagels, but bagels, you couldn't spread cream cheese while you're in the car. And you could get donuts or Snickers bars, but we all know that's you know, you feel awfully guilty and you can't stop eating one donut. And then there's a banana, which lends itself to driving in a car, but it's gone in a second. Meanwhile, this milkshake, it was filling. It kept them full through the morning. You could hold it in one hand in the car, and it was very satisfying. And it took a long time to consume. And so with that perspective of what really the purpose of the milkshake was, that got them thinking. And then McDonald's came out with their smoothies, and they started putting fruit in they didn't even call them milkshakes anymore because they didn't want people to feel guilty. And here they had a new product, their smoothies, as a result of this study. Now, something that can be challenging with jobs to be done, especially early on, is we're trying to make the connection between, wow, this sounds so abstract and theoretical, but you got to have a little bit of faith. It really is the path. Once we understand the reason a customer hires a product, then we really can get a lot closer to a better product that they like better. Because this is our normal perspective. We think in terms of products. We're very comfortable thinking in terms of products. This is a John Deere tractor for the 1025R, something I had a lot to do with bringing to the world. We call them compact utility tractors. So in our companies, we're comfortable thinking about products, the how. We're also comfortable thinking about customers. And this is where we stop. We sell tractors to homeowners. That's our business. And whatever we sell, hydraulic components, cements, whatever, we think of what we sell and who buys it. And we stop thinking there. But we need to ask one more question to really understand the market, which is why. Why is somebody buying this tractor? Well, they're buying it, in this case, among other things, to mow the lawn. That gives us this jobs to be done. And now we get some language, the job executor, the person who is hiring that compact utility tractor. Now, when we look at it this way, we can also see our competition much more accurately. The other solutions that customers hire to mow their lawn, specialized mowers or push mowers, or even they might hire a mowing service. So we're finally able to see the market the way that customers do. So now, beginning with this why, beginning with this job to be done, mowing the lawn, our goal is to help a customer to do this better. How can we improve their ability to mow the lawn better? Instead of asking the question, how should we improve our product? We ask, how can we better help them to mow the lawn? Now, that can be a little bit challenging. Where do we start? And that's where the job map comes into play. If we can take that high-level job and break it down into steps, into smaller steps, then we can analyze each one. Now think about this. To help, if we take the job of mowing the lawn, we break it down to steps, okay? Now, if we can understand the challenges with each of those steps, if we improve your ability to do each of the steps, you improve their ability to mow the lawn. So let's look at a job map for this particular job of mowing the lawn. Well, the first thing we're going to do, we're going to determine when to mow it. One of the questions is, when you're creating a job map, where does the job begin and where does it end? In this case, we begin when we determine when we're going to mow the lawn. Now we have verify the fuel level. That's an interesting one. It sounds like we're assuming a machine form here. But what about my substitute products, like the service? Well, notice what I've listed up here. My solution assumptions of the rotary blade lawn tractors and zero turn radius mowers that use rotary blades. It's not a terrible thing. It's not some awful sinful thought to have solution assumptions, but we do need to document them. And in this case, we're assuming a mower type that uses rotary blades and engines. So for that reason, it's okay to refer to the fuel level. So that's the second thing we do. What do we do next? We remove objects from the lawn, rocks, toys, sticks, and whatnot. One of the more annoying steps in the process, for sure. The next thing we do, we're assuming these certain types of machines. So we can say we're going to wear hearing protection. And now we mow the lawn. And notice that we get to what's called the execute step. It's a restatement of the high level statement. Mow the lawn, one of the steps is we actually get to the point where mowing the lawn. Very common. It's more common than not. After we mow the lawn, we're going to monitor the appearance, or even as we mow the lawn, we're going to monitor the appearance. We're going to remow areas that need it. And then finally, our last step, we're going to clean glass debris from the mower. Again, we're assuming the mower. If I had different assumptions up here, I couldn't refer to the mower, and I would not be able to refer to the fuel level or even the hearing protection. But because I've documented my assumptions, then I actually can say what I'm going to do. So there we've taken the job of mow the lawn and broken it down into 8 steps. Now I'm going to show this article, and I can't recommend it highly enough. I read it, I don't know, I read it probably quarterly, just on an ongoing basis. The amazing thing about it, it's not overly long, it's just a few pages, but it's just full of useful information. It begins with a background on jobs to be done, similar to what we kind of covered now. It talks about the job as a process, what we showed with mowing the lawn, and then this universal structure. I'm going to come back to that because in my 7 job tips. But man, this is an article this isn't just one to download. This is one to print and have handy and pull out your highlighter and go back and read it over and over. I certainly find it useful to do. So it's called the Customer-Centered Innovation Map, which really it's just the terminology changed by Bettencourt and Ulwick later. It's the same concept as the job map. Okay, so with that, let's ask this question. So why? What's the purpose of a job map? Like what is it useful for? And what you see here is an extremely simplified version of a job map I created for a real situation when it was a pretty cool assignment working with these companies. They anchored oil rigs in the North Sea. So I got to travel to Scotland. It's pretty cool. But anyways, so their job was to anchor these oil rigs. And so as part of that, they were performing the job of moving oil rig. So what's the purpose? How is this job map helpful? Well, it provides boundaries to a project scope. Where does this, so we're going to move an oil rig. Where does this begin and where does it end? And I can tell you with AIM, working with real companies on real projects, one of them, this always takes a bit of conversation. For whatever job we're trying to help a customer to do better, where does it begin? Where does it end? Takes a lot of conversation, and those endpoints often change. And so when we choose them, now we're providing boundaries to our project scope. And we know this is where we're going to help them to do something better. So it provides boundaries to the scope. The next thing it is, when we're doing our discovery interviews and we're exploring the job with customers, by listing all the job steps, we ensure that all of them we explore. Now in B2B, a very common challenge is you might want to grow or to move to some adjacent markets. But when you go to your customer, maybe you make cements or you make hydraulic hoses and your customer wants to put you in a box. Well, that's all this supplier ever does. They don't realize that you're actually interested in things beyond that. And so by assigning the job map like this, we can signal to them, no, this is the beginning and interesting end point. This is what we're interested in. And so as you go across all of your interviews, let's just say you were doing this job of moving an oil rig, and say, just like this, where this example came from, your company anchors, you anchor the new rig. And so maybe your customer only gives you feedback about this place anchors at the new site, but really you want to understand it more broadly. How do they determine where the site's going to be? How do they obtain the equipment to move and more? And then et cetera, et cetera. So it ensures all the steps are explored. And finally, it's really a superpower for you if you are moving. It's one thing if you're just working in your industry all the time and you never go beyond it. Then you sort of get a familiarity. You can get beyond. Maybe you don't need it as much. But if you want to understand various different types of businesses, wow, so as I went into this project, what in the world did I know about anchoring oil rigs? Not much. Anchoring my bass boat was about about the only thing I could even think. And this may be surprising, but there's actually a little bit more to moving an oil rig than my bass boat. So just by beginning with the job map, by creating it, it can really help you to understand an unfamiliar job in a space that you're not familiar with. And we get these different steps are from the article, the Customer-Centered Innovation Map. Define, locate, prepare, confirm, execute, monitor, modify, and conclude. I'm gonna come back to those here shortly. So how do we build a job map? What's the job map to build a job map? Well, this is my personal process. I begin with the who. Who are we trying to innovate for? And again, in working with clients, I ask this question, well, who's your customer? Who's doing the job? Who do we want to help to do this job better? Who do we want to create value for? And that is never an easy question to answer. So that's where I personally start, is the who. Who are we want to create value for? Next, what are the boundaries? What's the first job step? What's the last job step? That helps us. So now we know who we want to innovate for, and where does this process begin, and where does it end? Now we fill in the middle. What are the intermediate steps? And then we write each step as a job statement. So we have certain guidelines to write job statements well. Begin with a verb. Keep it as solution independent as possible. Make it clear, concise, unambiguous. Each step, don't have a job step in the middle that says reliability or something. Make sure each step is a job statement. Make sure if they all begin with a verb, yeah, you're on to a good start. Verify that the job steps are solution independent. Keep them, and solution independent, quite frankly, it's not black and white. There's a lot of gray in between. So you want them to be as solution independent as possible. When I get to our D- job map that we're going to improve, I'll show you some flavors of gray. Now, do you do this by yourself? Do you do it with the folks executing the job? Absolutely. You create a job map with people who create the job or who are performing the job. I do find it useful internally. Get with your sales team, get with whatever resources you can, and at least make an early effort. Consider it a rough draft of the job map. But it's never really complete or done at all until you work with job executors. Tell me, do I have this right? So you always want to not only confirm it with them, but you're sort of creating it along with them. And something interesting about that, so back to the previous one, sorry, confirming with job executors, I usually keep like drafts. I'll keep version 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and however many there are. The interesting thing is I do that almost obsessively. I don't tend to refer to the old ones once I have the new one, the latest one. But it's one thing that I've learned from doing that, from that documentation process, is it changes a lot. It changes a lot. And once you have that final one, if you have that final job map from mooring an anchor or mooring an oil rig, it will have such longevity. It will be good for decades, assuming you did a good job here and where you verified the job steps are solution independent. So we've confirmed the job map with executors. What are we going to do next? We're going to update the job map after speaking with our executors, and then we're going to document our work. So let's look at an example, something we're all familiar with, making a doctor's appointment. So we're going to determine who the job executor is. It's going to be the patient. What's our job to be done? Make the doctor's appointment. So our first step, what's the end point and what's the beginning point? This process begins when we become aware that an appointment is needed. And by the way, become aware is a phrase that comes up in job maps a lot. So it begins when we become aware that an appointment is needed, and it ends when we attend the appointment. Now think of all the different, you could have made the end point when you actually establish the appointment, but we're making the conclude point as attending the appointment. So we have our beginning and end. We fill in all the middle, determine who to see, et cetera, et cetera. We set up the appointment. We monitor some changes in the medical condition. We determine how to get there. Okay. So we've now created a job map for making a doctor's appointment, which is a job, by the way, that I feel quite certain has some room for some improvement. So, all right, so let's look at my seven job map tips. Number 1, interview job executors. I referred to this in the job map to create a job map. But if you look at this image, you'll see these job executors. I don't know if you can tell that, but they have a huge anchor there, an anchor that's many times larger than they are, and they're manipulating these steel cables. Look, sitting in our offices, even talking with salespeople or whatever, we're always going to be missing things if we're fooling ourselves, if we think we can create that job map without the people doing the job. So tip number 1, make sure you interview and get your insight from actual job executors. Now, I mentioned this universal model. Then I kind of told you I was going to get to it later. Let's talk about it. This model is from that article, the Customer-Centered Innovation Map, Harvard Business Review 2008. And you can see we have really 9 steps, 9 high-level steps. We're gonna, when we begin, we generally define something. We locate. Locate often means tools, gathering tools, accessing the stuff you need. You're gonna prepare to perform this job. And then the confirm, the confirm is like everything you can do just before you start to do the job. The execute step is often, like I had mow the lawn as the execute step for the job of mow the lawn. Not always, but the execute step is very commonly a restatement of the original job. While you're performing the job, you're going to monitor something. You're going to verify things. You're going to resolve and modify, and ultimately you're going to conclude, and the job is finished. So my tip number 2, refer to this universal job map. I print it out all the time, and it's fantastic. All these little lead-in verbs. We'll come back to that in a second. Now this one, so this is a challenge with folks as they're just learning to do this often. It's not a flow chart, and it's because it seems like a flow chart. We've got arrows, we've got boxes. It gets real tempting to pull in diamonds and have decision trees and go backwards and forwards. It's not a flow chart. It's not. It's the purpose of the job map, remember, is to make sure we cover all the steps. It's where does it begin? It's where does it end? If you make it a flow chart and go backwards and forwards, essentially you're going to drive a lot of unnecessary complexity into the job map, and which will complicate the purpose of it. So don't go backwards and forwards. Don't have decision trees. Don't make it a flow chart. Now, it's okay to mention, to define solutions, but you want to be very careful, because when you mention a solution, you narrow the scope of your project. And if you want the scope of your project to be narrower, that's fantastic, but don't do it accidentally. Look at this particular one. You know, there's a big winch here, and the job statement reads, turn on winch to raise the anchor. I don't care for that, because I mean, are there other ways? Because I've limited the scope of my project only to solutions that have winches. I would much prefer that to just be raise the anchor. And so I mentioned in my mow the lawn, I did refer to a fuel tank, but I made a conscious, deliberate decision that I was going to limit my scope to these gas-powered or diesel-powered mowers. Okay, so I made that very deliberately. So, but you want to be very careful about accidentally narrowing your scope. Now, next, remember that each job step is also a job to be done, and you must follow all those job rules. So you're going to begin with the verb, you're going to stay as solution independent as possible, and you're going to be clear and concise. Now, why is Darth Vader showing up here? And for this, I searched when I was filling up images, I put in action and Darth Vader showed up, and I was like, let's go with it. So when you see Darth Vader, maybe that'll remind you. Each job step is a job to be done. So you want to start with the verb. That's the most significant of those rules. Now, this one, number six here is definitely a bit tricky for folks that are learning to do job steps for the first time. I'm going to say this slowly, each step is a job to be done of what must be done, not what the job executor is doing, of what must be done, not what they are doing. And so here's a somewhat not too great job map for the job of washing clothes. Now notice we have this one, carry laundry basket downstairs. Well, that's what somebody's doing, but that's not a great job statement. And we're going to be much better to say transport clothes, the clothes to be washed, right? You might not have an upstairs, downstairs. You might not use laundry baskets. So this is an insidious one. I'm telling you, this is one that will sneak into your job map. When we get to our D- one, we'll go through some more of these. And finally, consider using the verbs as suggested by Ulwick and Bettencourt in that article. You know, for define, plan, select, determine, print out that article, take that universal map and use it. All right, so here is our D- job map. I'm going to help out with a couple of these, and then if you guys are able to, maybe you can help me to improve some of these. So here's my D- job map for the job of cleaning clothes. We begin by Whoops. We begin by putting clothes in the laundry basket. Then we carry the laundry basket downstairs. We measure and add laundry detergent. We put clothes in washer and turn on. We check the timer, put the clothes in the dryer, we iron them, and then we put the clothes in the laundry basket and take back down to the room. All right. Does that sound like a good job map? I've already told you it's not. But in practice, when I'm working with clients on job maps, I get a lot of job maps that look like this. What's wrong with it? These are statements of what the customer is doing, We want it to be a statement of what they seek to accomplish. Now, here's a tip. You can if you ask the question why, that really helps you get to a better statement. So put clothes in the laundry basket. Why? What does that help somebody to accomplish? To gather clothes. Carry laundry basket downstairs. What does that help them to accomplish? Transport clothes to be washed. Measure and add laundry detergent. What does that help them to do? It's really just about adding detergent. I've got these little pods. I'm sure we all do. I don't measure anything. I just throw them in the wash. Clearly measuring is not something that's needed. I'll ask you guys, if anybody wants to jump in. Put clothes in washer and turn on. How would you improve that?
Separate them.
Well, separating is interesting. Why do you separate them?
Because, well, I think they're, I think they're two separate steps. One's a hard step and one's an easy step.
But why do you separate them?
Why do you separate the two steps?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about separate the clothes. Yes. Put clothes in. Sorry, I misunderstood. Put clothes in washer and turn on.
Yeah.
Sure, you could.
And the turn on can also be complicated, right? I mean, some of these machines are not just flipping a switch. You have to start pushing all kinds of buttons.
Right, but all those buttons and switches and turning on, it's really just about washing clothes. Yeah. Right. So again, what you want is you want a job map that works all the time. You want to create something that 30 years from now, 50 years from now will still be good. This detergent's a little suspect. Really? Will we still need detergent? I don't know. Let's go to this timer.
Scott, why not clean clothes, right?
Clean clothes. Clean clothes would be just fine for right there. Yep. I might even argue clean clothes is better than wash clothes, actually. Yep. What about check timer? How would you improve that? So I asked the question, why are we checking the timer? I'm gonna go through these a little faster because I know I'm out past by 30 minutes. It's to determine when the wash is completed, right? I mean, just imagine you could have an app on your phone that gives you an alert or something, right? Checking the timer is a great example of that's what somebody is doing, but nobody needs to check the timer. The timer is just a solution to determine when the wash is completed. Put clothes in the dryer. It's really about drying clothes. How about iron clothes? I'll give y'all one more shot. Iron clothes. How can we improve that? Do we have to iron the clothes?
Not necessarily.
How would you improve that statement?
Remove wrinkles.
There you go. Remove wrinkles from clothes. I mean, and today it's not even that crazy. There's actually things you can spray on clothes, or even, as a business traveler, I bet everybody in this room has hung their clothes in the shower or just turn on the hot water. So it's about removing wrinkles. And then finally, we transport the clean clothes back to storage. Now our D- job map, now it's an A+. And by the way, note how all these statements got shorter. That's also very common. They all begin with verbs, so they're all good job statements. And again, if you ask the question why is somebody checking the timer? Oh, it's to determine when the wash is completed. That's a good question to get to what's really the final statement. All right, with that, kids, we'll look at just a little additional reading. I'll put these. We publish all of our master classes on YouTube, and I'll add some notes on there. So I'll put these links in there. There's one where Clayton Christensen tells that milkshake story, which I love to hear him talk about it, just for General Jobs Be Done Understanding. Highly recommend that. And then Tony Ulwick's book from a few years ago. He's been in this space a long time, a real innovator, if you will, in it. Jobs Be Done Theory to Practice. I recommend that. And then, of course, this reference I referred to before, the Customer-Centered Innovation Map, is one of the best, most well-known, well-read articles from Harvard Business Review. And if you're really crazy and insane and want to go further down the rabbit hole, way down the rabbit hole, further than you may even need to go, there's my book from last year. And if you go to statueandstone.com, you can read a little bit for free and get access to the book. Well, anyways, I didn't quite make it in 30 minutes, but we're not too far over.
Well, that was a lot to cover. I think you did real well getting as close to 30 minutes as you did. Let's open it up for any questions anybody has. Anybody have any questions? You're probably still processing that.
Well, I do have a
go ahead,
question.
Tony. Yeah.
I guess for me, this was a really good simplistic way of addressing a job to be done and the steps needed. But there's some jobs that are much more complicated, where sometimes we don't even know what tasks are needed in between, right? We're trying to figure it out as we go. Does this tool help me in those situations, or is this something where I know what the end result should be and I'm trying to just figure out the steps in between?
I'll tell you who does know: the person doing the job, the person performing the job. And so certainly, but even then, this can be helpful in realizing, hey, we don't know this. Like, it's something to know what you don't know. But it's for that exact reason that we shouldn't fool ourselves and just create these on our own and say we've got it. The person who knows the steps of the job is the person who is performing the job. So like and I use simpler examples here because it just in a teaching scenario, it makes it a little simpler. But if, like, for the job of mowing the lawn, everybody can probably relate to that, right? We can all, or I'm assuming most of us could probably have a pretty decent shot at creating a job map for mowing the lawn. Why is that? Because we've mowed the lawn before. Now, but to your point, we take on this really exotic assignment, anchoring. They don't use the word anchoring. They use the word mooring oil wells in the North Sea. How in the world do I, at my desk in Pittsburgh, North Carolina, know anything about mooring an oil well in the North Sea? Well, I go to the people who are doing it, but then from there, I just walk through it. Where does this begin? Where does it end? What happens in between? And by the way, I'm not too academic about, I'm okay, at least in a draft, of creating what they're actually doing. And then we sort of get into, why are they doing this? So they say they turn on the winch. Okay, why? What are you doing that for? Oh, it's to raise the anchor. Boom, that's what we're interested in. Or they say, I check the screen on my GPS. Okay, no, I'm not gonna, that's not my job step, check the GPS screen. I'm gonna say, what does that help you to accomplish? Well, it helps me to, determine my location or determine where I should be. But
looks like Paul's got a question here.
Okay.
I would just offer, maybe in support of the previous question, is there are times when you know where you want to go or what you want to do, but you don't know how to get there. And I think maybe you were alluding to that a little bit there, Scott, but maybe the first time that you moor that oil rig, there are a lot of blocks that have to get filled in on that job chart that you don't necessarily know what needs to be done or who does it. You want to moor the rig, but there's and I think in some cases when we are looking for innovation, we have to build that, because it may be something completely new.
Yeah, one thing that Paul and Tony, you both triggered, from a practical standpoint, how do we do this? Let me just share my screen something real quickly here. One thing you can do is you can use the outcomes map in the Blueprinter software. So what you could do is, this is the outcomes map down below, and you could start and I think you said this, Scott, you get as much as you can internally, And then you ask the customer, what did we miss? And you guys probably know this, but you can hit the edit button here. And now you can go in and you can add more steps, and you can ask the customer where those steps belong and move them around. So that might be a way of doing it. And Scott, the thing you just triggered today for me is I probably want to have that universal map in front of me. And maybe I'd start with defining, how do you know when you need new box blanks, right?
Right.
So that could be a tool you guys all could apply in a practical sense to kind of interact with that job executor to help build that job map out.
Yeah, it's gonna be common. It's not gonna be an unusual situation that we don't know all the stuff that goes in. It would be the mow the lawn is like, we might have a shot at having a chance at it. Why? Because we've done it. Washing clothes, depending on things I won't get into, you may or may not have a lot of experience with washing clothes.
But most of the time in B2B, we don't. Mark, were you going to say something?
Yeah.
Yeah, it kind of just triggered a question in terms of level of abstraction of what we're trying to do, and when you do this as well. Because it seems to me that there are many functional jobs that can come out through discovery interviews, and you could job map the hell out of it, for want of a better expression, right? So what I'm wondering is, perhaps after you've come up with outcome statements and then doing job maps for the top 10, for example, up to top 10, that seems like the most efficient use of time, shall we say, for this. Unless you're otherwise, do you think that actually at the beginning and job mapping, lots of different functional needs is useful? Can it be useful even earlier in the process as well?
Earlier, I'm not sure I understand the question, Mark. Maybe, I'm sorry.
So when you're doing a discovery interview, there are many jobs to be done, right? When that comes out of it. Would you job map all of them, or would you wait until you get the top 10 outcome statements and then job map the ones which are most important to the market? That's my question.
The most common approach would be to have a job map at a high enough level so that all of your outcomes are within it. All of your outcomes are within it. Now, if you did a super high level, I mean, I could see it's conceivable you might take one and go deeper, but really, so maybe this will help. The original intention of the job map as it was created by Ulwick and Bettencourt was as a tool to make sure for what you're studying that you've covered everything within. Everything within. So it would be, I won't say it would, so and even like in blueprinting, right? It's a trigger map, right? We use it to uncover more outcomes. So the job map is, I guess, the scope of your project. Like if you're studying mowing the lawn, your whole project's about mowing the lawn. Or if it's about mooring oil rigs, your whole project is about mooring oil rigs.
Which brings out an interesting application that I picked up from Scott. When we start a project with the team, a lot of times, in fact, Scott and I were just meeting with 3 teams before this. We were trying to go, do you guys need step 1 where you have all your market segments? And they go, yeah, we kind of do. So we almost always do that. You pick your market segment, your cluster of customers with similar needs. But then the second thing we do sometimes, and Scott is very good at this, is even before we're ready to interview, we'll go grab that outcomes map and we'll create a jobs map. And that helps us understand, okay, now we know what market segment, but tell me where this project is start. What's the first step where it's starting? And what's the last part of this? So you kind of, to get a really good project scope, you figure out your market segment and you figure out the job to be done, how broad or how narrow that is. So that's another application of this very early on.
Yeah, I routinely start with this. I'm gonna share again when I'm scoping a project with a client, because again, very often, if I back up, this is where a client usually is. Actually, they're right there. I think I'm still sharing, right?
Yeah.
This is where a client begins. Hey, we're interested in these products. We want to grow these products. We want to sell more of these products. We want to improve these products. And I'm like, okay, so I'll ask a bunch of questions, first of all, to get to who for. Who, and that's often not an easy question. Who do you want to improve these for? And once we get there, it feels like, wow, we're done. We've got our scope. But no, what is it that they are doing? Why are they purchasing your product? So that's really the place we want to get to. And once we do that, then we have jobs language at our disposal, just to more precisely understand it. But usually the beginning point is right here. We make these cables, chemicals, hoses, oils, whatever, tractors, and it's just because we're just not used to thinking this way. But
Maybe I give one quick example, Scott, that you and I just had this morning. They make a certain type of analytical equipment. And our question was, so is the project going to stop with that piece of analytical equipment? Or
Right.
are you going to want to be involved in the data analysis and gathering and so on and so forth? So that was a way of kind of defining the job to be done. The job that's very helpful for that.
yeah.
How about other questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, just I've got again an observation here. Again, level of abstraction, because I was going to say that mowing the lawn in itself has a solution within it, right?
That's
Yeah.
right.
But again, I think what kind of clicked for me is when you said defining the scope of it, right? We are in the market of compact utility tractors, right?
Right.
There will be other ways in which we could give the appearance of a well-kept lawn, but we're mainly in this kind of area and we're going to be doing it mechanically.
Yeah.
But again, sometimes depending on the scope of the project, you may want something disruptive, right? We know
Right.
that this thing. So then it will be, instead of having, because you framed it in this way as John Deere, you
Right.
could actually frame it in a completely different way,
That's right.
which links into a different level of abstraction for the functional perspective of mowing the lawn. But you could even go outside of it. Again, going about why, right? There's a functional reason why, but why do you mow the lawn in the first place, right?
Right.
There's a kind of a social and emotional element going into it with, going into design thinking is, to keep up with the neighbors, to have a sense of pride in my work. And then how do you do that? That's not necessarily going to, it not necessarily be a compact utility tractor. It could be something completely. Then you get into artificial lawns and all of those
Right.
sorts of things. But again, it helped me when you started saying about framing it. That really helps.
Well, Mark, that's a great point. And here's something you'll hear a lot, that your job statement should be completely solution independent. And I've taken a bit of a contrarian position on that because there's lots of areas of gray, and it depends how broad or narrow your project is. We could have had shorten the grass here, but I think if we make compact utility tractors, and I'm going to my customers and I say, what are the challenges you have when shortening the grass? And that sounds a bit off. It's so, with this project, mow the lawn, we're saying that, for our scope of innovation, we're okay. We're making a deliberate decision to define it as mowing. And what I say is just make it, if you narrow the scope by listing a solution there, just do it intentionally. Don't do it accidentally. It's very common to do it, turn on the switch to raise turn on the winch to raise the anchor. We would just sort of do it accidentally. But so if you have something in there, like you've used the term mow the lawn, it's not good or bad, but just make sure you've intentionally done it. Or because to your point, if you wanted to be something more disruptive, you might have shorten the grass or even, maintain your property. Maintain your property. And if now maintain your property, you've gone to a higher level, and you're going to get stuff about mulch, and you're going to get stuff about weeds and rodents and poison ivy and who knows what. So it's just a matter of being very deliberate. Intentional. Yeah.
Good stuff. Other questions?
But most of the time, when some people start here, and it takes a little bit of of conversation, just because they're just why? Because look, we're electrical engineers, we're mechanical engineers, we're hydraulics. Like, we love this stuff. We tinker with things, and so we don't ask these other questions often. It's just more natural. Sorry, I'm keep going back the wrong direction on my thing here. So we want to go from a product to who's using it to why are they using it. The why question is that's where jobs to be done gets you. It's the job is the answer to why. Oh, to mow the lawn, to beautify my property, to clean my clothes, to moor and anchor.
Good stuff, Scott. Other questions or observations?
So again, Tony Gishua, I have another example. I want to remodel my kitchen because my wife wants to do it, actually, not because I really want to.
Understood.
But I don't know the steps involved in remodeling a kitchen because I've never done it.
Mhm.
But what I understand here is that I need to break that job into specific steps.
Well, sorry, let me jump in here. So you've got actually a couple jobs there. You definitely have a job of remodel the kitchen, but you have a separate job. Learn to remodel the kitchen. Those are completely different jobs. Learn to remodel the kitchen. That's really the one that you have. If I went to a contractor, he doesn't have learn to use it. He doesn't have the job learn to remodel the kitchen. He goes straight to remodel the kitchen. So if we want to understand the challenges with remodeling the kitchen, you're not a good person to ask. Why? You're not doing the job. The job executor is the person doing the job. You do have the job of learn to remodel the kitchen. And
Actually, Scott, he's got 3 jobs. His first job is learn what his wife wants.
right, that's right. But learning to do a job and doing the job are separate. They're just separate jobs. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. Very good.
Good, Tony. Very helpful. Other questions? Scott, really good stuff here. I think this one might get played. This recording might get played. You packed a lot in here. And I think it's safe to say if you guys have questions and you want to go a little deeper, you can tell Scott's interested in this topic. I think he would entertain any emails or phone calls if you want to go a little deeper. So definitely reach out to our resident guru on jobs to be done and job mapping. And let me just share what we got coming up next time. So we'll see who's in the barrel next time here, Scott, in a couple of weeks. Let me get out of here for a second. And we'll go over to our Monday Masterclass. And it looks like on July 12th, it looks like it's my turn in the barrel, Scott. We'll be going over the 12 rules of B2B product launch. We don't often talk about this, but when we do, Blueprinting is our main flagship product. And many of you know we also do Minesweeper, Project De-risking, but we haven't talked a lot about LaunchStar lately. We're retooling some of the software. That's why we're being a little quiet. However, there's some really powerful things you can do with B2B product launch. One of my clients once said, Dan, we don't release our products, we let them escape. And so if you want to do a little more dynamic launch of your product, that's what we'll be covering in a couple of weeks here. Any last questions before we say so long for now? Okay, great. Thanks everybody for joining us. We really appreciate it.
I want to throw one final comment out here. If some of this did seem a little abstract, really what I'd encourage you to do, I'm going to point you back to that article, the Customer-Centered Innovation Map. It's very brief. It's not overly long, especially coming off this brief session today. I think at the time it'd be great to read that article and let that reinforce a few things, because to use a phrase Dan uses commonly, it's a very powerful concept. And so sorry, Dan, I just wanted to throw that in as a final.
No, that's a really good point. Zach, I'll say hi to you, Zach. I didn't catch you earlier, but the recording and that article are really powerful. I can see you putting it to very good use. Yeah. Thanks,
Great.
Paul,
Yeah,
Tony, Mark, Nathan, all you guys.
Thanks,
all right.
See you guys.
Bye-bye
Thank you.
now.